Bill Oddie, thanks so much for welcoming us here to your house in London.
It's a great pleasure. It's and even better, it interrupted me working, which anything that will give me a little break is a very good idea, and particularly because I was beginning to depress myself over what I was writing about.
What sort of world will people inherit in 10 generations' time?
Blimey. Well, I'd love to think. I'd love to be able to say lots of optimistic things. Unfortunately, when you delve into what's going on just about on any level, I'm afraid I can't see how I can say any optimistic things. All I can say is it's a long way, so don't worry about it yet. But I can't pretend that I haven't found the last couple of years really a bit of a downer, to say the least, and yet I feel guilty at pointing that out. And I know I'm not alone in this. A lot of people, I know Attenborough, for example, has sort of made a point for a long time of not being contentious and controversial, and he used to get a bit of stick for it. But a few years ago, he just said, I can't do this. I'm going to have to scare people if necessary by tell them what's going on, whether it helps or not. But it doesn't help if you don't scare people, because, obviously it's scary stuff.
Yeah. You've been an author, actor, comedian, artist, naturalist and musician, but if you had to write down your occupation on a form, which one would you pick?
I usually put a writer, and then they'll hire me a car. There's several things to avoid on there, It's not anything to do with art or something like that. They wouldn't like that. Oh no, sorry sir, we can't hire you on, or we're going to up your tax or something like that. So, but even for the one I wouldn't put, that's easy to answer. I never put comedian, because I don't think I was or am, and certainly won't be. And I always think of that as a sort of stand-up act, doing gags. And I wasn't. I mean, I was like, none of my group were all the Pythons and Goodies and that sort of thing. We were all writers who then performed because it wasn't an insult to actors, although we weren't beyond insulting actors as much as possible. But I don't, put it this way, I don't miss the comedy element, because I think it's still there. If I give I know full well if I have to give a speech at a conservation do or something like that, and this happens quite a lot really, I've never got out of the habit of coming off afterwards and thinking, how many laughs did I get? Yes. And in fact, the subject is probably absolutely doomy, but nevertheless, one tries to lighten it up a bit, by putting a bit of humour. And I think it's important, because actually if you don't have a humorous take on things, you're liable to be a bit pedantic and a bit inflexible and things like that,
You certainly liven things up presenting Autumn Watch and Springwatch with, and your relationship with Kate Humble on that was absolutely intriguing. Did that rapport differ off-air?
Oh yes. I mean, Kate and I actually got on very well, but it was the first, especially the first year, the question was all the time, are we at each other all the time, or do we like each other, do we hate each other? Kate, there were elements of my way of doing things which is a little less disciplined, put it that way, than Kate, and so I know there were a couple of moments when she just wanted, the minute the camera cut, she said, for God's sake, don't cut me off like that. And I said, I'm not cutting you off, honestly I'm not, it's just, something else popped into my head and that sort of thing. But no, we developed a very good rapport, and there should have been a sort of very, very late night version. There were some late night versions, but a very late night version, because which basically showed you what went on behind the scenes, because the rehearsals were absolutely disgraceful. We were both of us got to the stage on the second or third series where we tried to be responsible enough so they knew roughly what we were going to do, but we would never say anything that we were actually going to say in the evening. And most of what we we said would be sort of like a comedy script. It really was, and we got voted best comedy duo by something, and it would all be about cooking the birds or something like this, something absolutely outrageous. So
did you ever get ticked off for that?
We didn't then. The only thing. It's come back some quite funny memories, because the only thing, he wasn't so much ticked off as warned,
right?
Because they shouldn't do this, but somebody who was in charge of the sort of campsite that was set up to do Springwatch in this case, was in the habit of allowing sort of school parties and things to come into the control room so they could see what was going on. And if this was in the middle of the day's rehearsal, this was not a good idea, because it was undoubtedly not suitable for children. And this happened to us one day, and we'd been absolutely disgustingly rude and filthy and everything else. And somebody came in and whispered to us, said, "Did anybody tell you there's a party of brownies in?"
Oh, dear.
And there was, but they got their something badge after that.
Yes,
I don't know what we could be shocked and get away with it badge.
Oh dear. When that BBC career then came to a close, was that fairly abrupt for you, or did you sort of foresee a winding down there?
It was very abrupt, yes. I'd like to think it might not have entirely come to a close yet. Funny enough, I don't blame you for saying so, but because I would have said the same thing. But no, it wasn't. It wasn't in sort of planned, intentional, or anything else. I mean, basically, I can hand on heart say, without getting too contentious about it, I don't really know why I was called into the office eventually and said, look, how can we put this? We won't be asking you to do Springwatch next year. And I look back on a period then, and I think I was getting very abrasive and a bit sort of full of myself or something. And I'd suffered from depressions for years, but what I hadn't recognised, and it took another year for any flipping doctor to finally suggest that this was actually bipolar behaviour. And so I would have to say that some of my attitudes, demeanours, call it what you will, during that one autumn, whenever that was, about 4 years ago now, I suppose, I was going through a fairly manic stage. I'd look back and I'd like to see a replay. And say,
well, you kept diaries throughout that period.
Yeah, I did, and I can't pretend I think that the BBC were remotely honourable about it, because they didn't say anything about sort of watch it or whatever, except there was an atmosphere at the Beeb at that time with the Jonathan Russell Brand bit and that, where they became so obsessed with somebody doing something naughty or saying something wrong and so on and so forth. But and I think, though I never had done, to my knowledge, they probably thought I might, something like that. But in a way, I look at that is one I'll, to a point, look at the bright side, because it's even talking to some of the other people, not necessarily at Springwatch, although I do see some of them, it's not quite what it was a few years ago in terms of budget and so on and so forth, and it's you do lose. I personally would have axed it about 4 years ago. I'd drop me and then think you might as well drop the whole lot. But that's I don't mean that kindly if anybody's watching. But
does it attempt, do you think, now to appeal more to the masses, if you like, and as such it becomes perhaps less demanding?
Well, I'm going to say, you said it, because I wouldn't dream of saying such a thing.
No, okay.
And neither would I be in a position to, because I'm afraid I can honestly say I don't watch it. And I haven't watched it hardly at all. I found that sort of unbearable in that sense. I thought, I'm sorry, this is a programme I was in right at the beginning, and I hope contributed a lot to and helped shape various things in it. And I didn't want to watch somebody else doing it, not because it was good or it's bad. I just didn't want to,
And you've mentioned that, hopefully you may be back on our screens one day, and on behalf of the general public, that would be absolutely wonderful. What about Bill, factual programmes in general, do you think they're more shallow now?
I don't know. Well, again, you know, I suppose it's always difficult to be that sort of, I don't know, judgmental about TV shows, because, you know, you rapidly find, I do, that once you've found the ones you like, you watch them, and you don't bother. You know, you're not going to go through everything and say, there might be some really bad ones here, I'll have a look through, you know. I have to say, I'm not a huge telly watcher, but I am absolutely certain what I watch by and large, you know. And sport is the main thing, to be honest. So
what sort of sport?
Change. Football and rugby and occasional other things.
Do you support a certain?
Don't. We're dying before the public's eyes at the moment, so I can't bring myself to say it. And. I never thought I'd get to the stage where I'm thinking of switching to Liverpool. Well, there you go.
You can't say that.
But if I had to choose a genre where I sort of go, I don't understand why people do this, it would be cooking programmes. I haven't a clue why anybody would want to watch.
You must have been invited to take part.
Oh yeah, I've done one or two. I did the Hairy Bikers and things, and that was fun to be there. And I'm not saying they're not nice people and they do things, but the idea of just watching something cooking, it seems to be a bit uninteresting, but nothing like as baffling as the fact that the colour supplements have pages of pictures of food. What do you want a picture of food for? You know, it's like those tend to be not quite so classy cafes that have a laminated board with a picture of the hot dogs and everything else, and those horrible ice creams and little plastic characters that come. But I can't imagine why anybody would want to look at those.
On a different note, were you making a statement by going to receive your OBE in a camouflage shirt and a crumpled jacket?
Well, I'm afraid this is a matter of definition, you see. First of all, let me say, there is no compunction on anyone going to Buckingham Palace to collect something or other, apart from the milk bottles or something like that. I mean, something you dangle around your neck. It's there's no compunction whatsoever to wear, you know, the top hat and tails thing. They actually, it's not even mentioned the dress code, you know.
No.
It's just sort of taken for granted you won't be too bad. But there is, everybody thinks, oh, you've got to get your top hat and tails. But no, that's not true. So for me, anyway, wearing what amounted to a suit, if I remember rightly, must have done, yeah. I mean, that was once in 20 years, you know. I hadn't worn a suit for donkey's years, and certainly not a tie. I think somebody tried to strangle me when I was a baby or something, because I've got a real aversion to ties. Yeah.
I was wearing one outside, but I took it off.
Yeah, you took it off. Goodness. Yeah, but I don't like them in the house. No, and the shirt was not a camouflage shirt. It was bright. Yes. I wouldn't say gaudy, it was bright. It was basically greens and yellows, and it was basically a Hawaiian shirt, you know. So a Hawaiian shirt and this lightweight summer suit, I don't think raised any eyebrows, except, of course, by the occasional newspaper, you know, sort of, he should be hung, drawn and quartered for this sacrilege, you know.
Well, I don't think it was portrayed negatively. I just think perhaps a couple picked up on it and said, you know, but no, so there's...
Oh, no, one or two did. There's one or two. There used to be the occasional, I can't even remember the names of the occasional journalist who was always having a go. Everybody who's on the telly has this, you know, somebody they have a go at, and I've done it myself, actually. Yeah.
Why aren't people today engaging enough with wildlife and the natural world?
Well, that is a very big question, obviously. I'm going to make a quite glib, slick answer first, which is that they're not that interested. I think, unfortunately, for those of us who are interested in wildlife as a subject, as a hobby, as opposed to part of the whole survival thing. Those are different things. Now, if you say to somebody, do you actually want to, fry in global warming? And they'd probably say no. But if you said, do you really care about the number of bitterns in this country? I should imagine they'd say, what's a bittern? Or I don't really care.
Yeah.
And I think it's exaggerated, and it's thing has been obsessing me a lot actually recently, because I almost feel, and I don't know what the answer to this is, but I almost feel that maybe we're going the wrong way to achieve what we're trying to achieve. And then you say, what are we trying to achieve? Well, we don't want to lose species, we don't want to lose natural habitats, etc., etc., not just for ecological reasons and so environmental reasons, but we don't want to lose those. So you've got to have laws and restrictions and an attitude, even more so, from whoever's in the government at the time. You've got to have the government actually caring about nature for want of a better word, the right reasons. And wouldn't it be wonderful if any of them did? Now, with this particular government, I've never known anything like it. I mean, they are seriously dangerous in terms of their lack of interest and soul and caring for the British countryside and its wildlife. Seriously. We only have to listen to these absurd statements that come spewing out of Owen Paterson in particular, and occasionally Cameron, and therefore there must be other people around us think much the same thing. Basically, nature is a nuisance. And I've heard them say things similar. We need to control it. Cameron came out with something like that. I believe in controlling wildlife, that sort of thing, which means if it's actually going to annoy your friend, the wealthy farmer down the road, or stop you fracking or something, they don't care. They really don't care. And
their badger cull policy, of course, that's been widely accepted as a disaster.
It's nonsense.
MPs voted overwhelmingly to halt it.
Yeah, but that's a classic example, of. I mean, I've been very involved with the badger thing right from the start, and. Yes, that meeting that they had, theoretically, get people to come and have a debate. It was classed as a debate. But apparently, first of all, the government don't have to take any notice of what the result was. And second of all, most of the Tories boycotted and didn't go along. The result was, as you say, 219 for abandoning the coal, one, whoever that person was, against it, wanting to carry on doing it.
What's a better way to control bovine TB? Should we be controlling it?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a horrible thing, and you must never forget that people in animal organisations, animal welfare and things like that are going to be just as concerned about the welfare of farm animals. Yeah. They're not saying sort of, let the cows die, we don't care, the badgers are all right. They would equally be in arms if they thought that a farm animal was being treated really badly. But in this case, with the badger cull, basically, you've got the government saying this, but then the government are friends with, quite literally friends with in many cases, and certainly financially friends with certain big landowners. The landowners get sort of ticked off as farmers, all farmers, but it's not true. It just isn't true. And the police have a very difficult circumstance as well, because... That's
it. With the financial side, is the only realistic way to safeguard the environment now actually through fiscal policies?
Yes, it probably is. It probably is. Whether it's going to happen or not, I don't know. I mean, and I can't. There's no point in saying it otherwise. But most of the things I've been involved in over the last couple of years, and made a point of being involved in, involve people who are putting money into destroying habitat and birds and so on and so forth. And so I did that little film for Global Witness. It's an organisation that sort of exposes what's going on out there. And this was about the fact that HSBC Bank were financing a lot of the clearance of rainforest in Indonesia and the like.
And there you were in HSBC being asked to leave by those.
That had been an ambition. You see, that's where the bit of levity comes into it. Because I thought I've always really wanted to be in a situation where somebody put their hand over the camera and made you go, said, no, stop filming, which the HSBC doorman duly did, but not until we got for him out to film.
We can't save everything. So some people, I think, advocate targeting monetary resources at sort of selected hotspots around the world, such as the Amazon rainforest, to preserve the greatest proportion of the world's biodiversity. Is that a good idea?
Well, I don't see why it isn't a good idea. Whether it's a practical idea is another thing, because for every chunk of rainforest that somebody manages to get hold of who's going to do the right thing, there's going to be another chunk where the people come in and chop the trees down, and that requires... You just see it everywhere, every situation. That requires, to a point also, a change in lifestyle, probably, for some of the people there, And whilst the lifestyle is still fairly basic, living off the forest doesn't mean actually chopping it all down. But then, the people who do could say, well, we're living off the forest too. We're chopping it all down and sending it off to paper mills, or then we're going to plant the palm oil and so on and so forth. So in an awful sort of way, you could say they were living off the forest, I don't see, and I think I should keep it quiet because it probably only upset people. But I don't see an improvement in, people's caring. The very words that are involved are caring and a sort of affection and soul and compassion. They're all that kind of word, and that would require people to feel like that about certainly animals and birds and all the wildlife and certain habitats as well, I don't see that actually improving, and I don't see how it will. We'll try. I'll have a bash. You try, and my little contribution for years was just to try and get people to enjoy it, and on the principle, if you enjoy something, you don't want to lose it, you want to protect it, So it's not a bad principle to keep stuck in your mind, But when 90% of what I have to do these days involves slagging somebody off, it's going along and saying what a disaster this government policy is, or so on and so forth, and look at what they're doing to the forest, I mean, everybody who works in conservation, environmental type stuff has the same problem. I've talked to a lot of people on this, and they saying, "Do you get a bit fed up?" Oh, yeah. I remember David Attenborough, actually. It's a lovely thing he said to me once, because I was at a do with him. It was a rainforest event, actually, and I said, "David, I'm getting, I don't know, how can I put that? I'm getting really sort of negative about things, feeling really down." And he said, "Oh, we all do that, but there's no point in it, is there?" And I thought, oh yeah, you're probably right there. He's right by saying you can't let it, it's in the background, but now what are we going to do that we can do? I guess that's always something, and I wonder... I'm just going through a period to a certain extent where I wonder whether all the right things are being done. There's lots of good, worthy things, but are they actually achieving anything? And if you took them out of the equation and did something else, put the money from there to there, and the effort, maybe that would be more effective, But it would upset a lot of people if you did that.
David Attenborough, of course, is I think he's a patron for the Optimum Population Trust.
Yes.
And he says that if we don't control our population, then the natural world will. So is there a need to regulate the world's population, in your view?
Well, I'm not the person else, and David would obviously know more than me, but I can well believe that's the case. I know when he finally decided, look, I've got to get into the controversial stuff. It's all very well made, yes, wonderful series, but I've got to come down and say what I really think. It was the population thing, and I'd absolutely 100% agree with him. But, I mean, what do you do there? Do we have the Chinese, two kids in the family routine, or what? Or do we make anybody who has 5 children feel incredibly guilty and sell them to somebody who doesn't have any? I don't know. I mean, what can you do? What can you do? But no, I mean, by any token, you just, whether it's ultimately completely disastrous or just makes the world even less enjoyable or something, then...
So it perhaps might be necessary for something radical to just go for it.
Like a worldwide plague of some sort, yes. Something like that. I think that's what David's sort of hinting at in a way. There could be something like that, and maybe whether there's a purpose or not, whether there's anybody doing that up there, I don't know. But it does drive me nuts, I must say. Who cares what drives me nuts? But it's, seeing big families, especially in areas where, it's the only reason there's big families is because there's no birth control or anything, or possibly a religious thing, as well. Oh, it's murder if we have birth control. No, come on, please. That's not a good way to proceed, really.
Penultimately, Bill, do you think it should be mandatory for those at secondary school to study the environment?
That's a very good question. That is a very good question, actually. Yes, I do, because the standard pattern has been for years, certainly in this country and probably in others, has been that if you go to a primary school, as I've often been, I've got grandchildren and I visit the schools for various reasons, then depending a bit on how green the teacher is, as it were, there will be a fair amount going on. They'll go to my grandchildren in primary school just down the road here, and they go to a sort of urban nature reserve for a day out. They go out on the very lucky, they go to Hampstead Heath close by, so they go out with the rangers, and I've been with them, and they'll show them things, and they'll have a good day out. They'll have a very good day out, there's no doubt about that. I'm afraid that the little bit of a fallacy, though, is that all those kids will sort of grow up really caring and frantically interested about it. They had a good day out, they had a good play, and they will find some things interesting. But unfortunately, when they get to secondary school, that interest tends to wane anyway. But as you imply, there's very little in what you might call environmental education going on in the secondary school. Never has been. You might just about... I was fortunate that I went to a school where if we, boys being a boys' school, they had an idea for something that they wanted to form a club or something like that, then by and large we could. And I was part of bringing up the Natural History Society onto a bigger level, from 2 to 6 or something. And but at least we had that opportunity to sort of specialise, in a sense, just after school usually, something like that.
Finally, have you got any exciting projects that you're currently working on, or any in line for the future?
God, you get to my age, your only real project is to stay alive and reasonably healthy, really. I'm afraid that is very true.
You're not at that age yet.
I am. Don't you? Well, I'm 72 now. It's sort of... No, I, as they say, don't feel it and all that sort of thing. And I know as a lifestyle choice, I enjoy sort of the company and the activities, etc., and the opinions of, I'd say, all generations actually, but particularly younger ones. If I may say so, it's why coming here today. I sort of I'm come anyway. I live here, don't I?
We've come
you
here.
Coming here today, yes, what are you doing here? But it's. you know, I'll always do those things. My agent sort of goes spare because, of course, it's never in fee or anything. I'm not touting now either. But, you know, I said, no, I enjoy it. That's what I really like doing those things. And sometimes it's a sort of an outing somewhere, or, you know, I took the Cambridge Union and then some other society in Cambridge and that kind of thing. Being around different age groups, you know, not just little children. I love little children. That's a very dangerous thing to say, isn't it? I'm operating U-tree down here like a shot now. I don't really like them, but anyway, I love going to the primary school and seeing their silly shows and things that they do. Absolutely love that. But yes, I would feel the idea of only having company of people of my age would be awful, absolutely awful. I'm not, no disrespect to me or them, but dreadful business. You know, I always radiate in a big gathering. I always radiate to the younger people, and very often the younger women too. That's not some lecherous purpose, but I actually find in the area of conservation and those charities and that some really great girls and women of all ages, but it's a good mixed area, you know. A number of things you still go to, and it's all blokes around a table, you know. Even ones that surprised me. I went to a meeting of, and I won't name them, one of the largest organisations the other night for a general sort of discussion of where they're going and what they're doing, that sort of thing. And I think there were 2 women, you know, and the rest it was like the bleeding cabinet or something, you know. Wish it had been.
Bill Oddie, I really appreciate the time. Thank you so much for inviting us. It's really lovely, and
it's a pleasure.
Setting super. Thank you so much.
Not at all.
Cheers.
It's a pleasure. I hope I haven't made you too pessimistic.